boy, I need a co-host on this thing.
Mhm.
So grace groups, this is a proposal for what I'm thinking, and this is all nothing set in stone. I'm open to input from everyone. But this is an idea for small groups, particularly at this time of pandemic, when we can't gather as a congregation for worship, but we can safely gather in smaller groups, either in person or also using technology and doing it remotely like we are tonight. So these, what I'm calling grace groups, are the foundation, the rationale for them is described in the baptismal covenant and those promises that we make to one another in the baptismal covenant. Whenever someone is baptized, when kids are confirmed, and when the congregation reaffirms our baptismal covenant, that with God's help, we will proclaim the good news and live according to the example of Christ. We will surround one another with a community of love and forgiveness, that we may grow in our trust of God and be found faithful in our service to others. And we will pray for one another, that we may be true disciples who walk in the way that leads to life. And that's found on page 35 of the United Methodist Hymnal. So this is my proposal for these groups, that they meet for 1 hour. The group determines meeting frequency, whether, I certainly would recommend that they try to meet weekly. But if that's not going to work for them, they decide how frequently they want to meet, whether it's weekly, every 2 weeks, monthly. I would hope not less than monthly. But my recommendation is that these groups such as this work best when they can meet weekly for 1 hour. The group determines the time and place of the meetings. Virtual meetings are possible using Zoom or Google Meet, and there are other platforms that can be used. The group needs a host who facilitates the meeting, and the meeting leadership may be shared. So different members of the group can take turns leading from week to week. And I would like, as the pastor, I would like to meet with the hosts monthly. And that's an important step, because that also helps keep these groups connected to the church, and that they don't become cliques or it's helpful for me to know how each group is doing, or me or whoever the pastor is. I'm going to stop there for a minute and just want to get your thinking, your input on this.
How do we reach out to who's going to come to the groups? Are we going to put our names out there and say we'd like to host a group? Would anybody like to come to us? How are we going to reach out to people to let them know about these groups? How are they going to sign up or whatever?
Well, that's a very good question, and I frankly haven't figured that out, Joan. So I welcome any help. My idea was that whoever like if you and Randy want to host a meeting, a group, you reach out to 3 or 4 friends of yours that you would like to be in a group with, and then that becomes your group.
Okay.
That, host people who feel like they would like to host a group, then take the initiative to find 3 or 4 or 5 friends, people that they know, and invite them to be in their group. And, we need a way for me, them to let me know, because I want to keep this organized so that we can then eventually have some kind of a list, so that we can make a list of, okay, these are the groups. And if people, want to join a group, we can give them a choice of groups that are open to receiving new members.
Just don't want it to be like, I don't want to overlook somebody that would really like to, but would really kind of almost.
Yeah, and I think we can put
have a
out,
person that would like
what I
to be
need to
invited.
do is when we're done with this is to put out a general, say, okay, we'll put this out to the congregation
Yeah, okay.
and ask people, just sort of poll ask people to respond by contacting the church office to let us know, okay, who do you want to do this?
Mhm.
Let us know. And
Okay.
we'll get these groups organized in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, all right, that helps to know. Thank you.
And that's why, I've tried to recruit I have a small group of people who volunteered to host groups. And we need to build on that list. So that's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. I'd like to see this become more multi-generational too. I'd be kind of worried about it just being a generational kind of thing. And I don't know how about going about doing that. And because every generation is going to have different needs and different time frames of meeting and things of that nature.
Right.
One other follow-up. I agree with that about the different generations. I thought it was helpful that DBC meetings were in the bulletin, and I'm sure they were in the newsletter, because I had been thinking about it for a while before I contacted Marita about it. And I think that kind of thing is really helpful for people who maybe aren't immediately connected, but can see, like in their case, I could see what they were reading or a topic. And so, it was sort of like I had a little bit of a sense about the group. I didn't know who exactly was in it, but
Yeah.
it made it easier to make a decision. And if we had multiple groups, it would, that would be even better.
Yes. And once, if and when we get some groups going, we will definitely, that will become part of the church's calendar. When those various groups are meeting, and encouraging, people who, like yourself, who are interested in it, to just contact us, and then we'll work to get people connected to groups or forming new groups.
Could I also ask a really practical question, just because of where we are now with COVID?
Yeah.
I know that I personally would not meet in person with a group of 10 people, even if it's permitted. That's just not something I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And I actually, most of my friends aren't either, unless they're just not telling me and excluding me. No, I don't think that's happening.
I want to say, I would not want the groups to be 10 people.
Okay.
My preference would be to be no more than 5.
Oh, well, even if I have to be really, I feel like I have to be really careful with my contacts.
Sure,
because
yeah.
I'm visiting a 95-year-old mother-in-law. I mean, we're
Right.
all being careful.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that's maybe an issue right now. But I'd hate to pick a group just because it was all online or not online. I guess that could happen.
And I suspect in the beginning, most of them will be online. Because I think a lot of people are in your situation, Ruth, where they would be reluctant to meet in person. Particularly now that, the weather's getting colder and you're not going to want to meet outdoors. Like DBC has been able to have a few meetings outdoors in the Tumanong's backyard, but that's coming to an end pretty quickly.
Well, and it's predicted that the COVID numbers are going to go up over the next few months too.
And they are going up. Yeah.
DBC, deeper, better.
Zoom actually gives you an opportunity to if we had multiple small groups going, where someone could be invited and join in and listen and see whether whether or not they fit in a group or not, and then maybe attend another before they
Commit.
commit into
Yeah.
one group. So Zoom may be an advantage to make it a little easier to do that.
And let me, I'm going to go to the next slide. The next slide is a recommended meeting agenda. That, the opening 5 minutes are greeting and an opening prayer, or, a devotional, but I would a time of prayer, followed by 25 minutes of that I'm calling growth and discipleship, that is shaped by the general rule of discipleship, which we talked about in this class and that I write about in the book, which is to witness to Jesus Christ in the world and to follow his teachings through acts of compassion, justice, worship, and devotion under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. That each member takes a few minutes just to share what she or he has done or not done in light of that rule of life, the general rule of discipleship. Because I'd like the first half of this meeting to be focused on being more intentional about our discipleship, shaped by this rule of life has its roots in the general rules. And this is a time where, you learn from each other, you inspire each other, you support each other in your own discipleship. And it's very flexible. You decide how you're going to do this and how you're going to share in this part of the meeting. Then when everybody's shared, then you transition to a time of study or conversation. And I have a list of suggestions for what you can do. You can do Bible study. You could do something like what DBC does, which is to read a book and then discuss it for a time. You can do Bible study together. And I have a list of suggested resources, and the group can come up with their own, whatever they want to do. This is entirely up to the group. And take the last 5 minutes to share prayer concerns and offer a closing prayer, and then you go home. It's pretty simple and very flexible. So I wonder what you thought of this.
How regimented is that time? If you have 3 people, 25 minutes might be too long and maybe too short. I don't know.
People tend to fill the time that they have available to them, is my experience. So, some days it may be, you can, the group can complete, if it's only 3 or 4 people, 25 minutes is more than enough time. And then you spend the rest of the time with your whatever you're studying together.
Do you see this starting? I kind of see it evolving if people are a little bit reluctant for that growth and discipleship part. Maybe begin with a larger piece of the study and gradually move the group to that. Is that an approach, or do you just cold turkey dive into it like that?
Well, I think, we're all, and I'm going to provide some resources to help people understand and give suggestions for what, about the general rule of discipleship as a guide for living as a disciple.
I think that'll help.
I'm curious, Randy, if you have any idea about what the reticence is for people or what the reluctance is.
I think as you grow closer to people and understand them a little bit, you're more willing to open up on things that are you're kind of putting it out on your shirt sleeve, you know, and some people who may be in the group, especially if they're newer, maybe not wanting to share to that level, and they need to build a comfort level. And I think sometimes you can do that through the study and conversation. I think that can warm people up to sharing deeper thoughts and
Well,
sharing what they've
and I just want to be a little more clear about what, you know, sharing, the sharing that that I would like to see happen in the first part of the meeting, around what I have done in since our last meeting to witness to Jesus, you know, Christ in the world, and to follow his teaching, you know, what acts of compassion have I done? And acts of compassion are something that I have done to help another person. So it's simply saying, okay, I met a guy on the street who said he was hungry. I bought him lunch. That's the kind of stuff that we're sharing in this. It's simply what you've done or not done.
Steve,
Yeah.
you know, you said you've been in a group for 20 years or something,
Right.
right? So have you ever walked out of the meeting feeling not good about yourself?
No.
No. I think that's what Randy's kind of getting at,
And
which is,
well, and what happens when you take that general rule and you say, okay, I'm going to do my best to shape to be intentional about doing this and incorporating this into my daily life. And I found, you know, like, and I do this as I've been in what it's called and if you read the book, you read a little bit about covenant discipleship groups, because that book was written to be a foundational resource for that ministry. And so I've been in a covenant discipleship group since I was in seminary. And, you know, my group now meets every Thursday morning. And we have a covenant, and I'm not asking, these groups are just going to use the general rule of discipleship. With a covenant discipleship group, my group, the groups write a covenant, which this is my covenant, which we all work on, and we all agreed to specific acts of compassion and acts of justice, acts of worship and acts of devotion that we have agreed that we're going to do our best to practice these disciplines, and then when we meet on Thursday morning, give an account of what we've done and, you know, our experience. So for example, we have one act of compassion, which is, I will seek out ways to show compassion for all people in all God's creation. So anyway, all of this is to answer your question, Susie. The members of the group, I never felt judged or anything by anyone else in the group. I'm much harder on myself than anyone in my group is on me. And I typically leave the group saying, you know, I can do better, you know, and that effort helps me to be, that's why I'm in the group, is to make sure that I am thinking about this stuff every week and every day, really. And it's a way of making sure you're doing what we all promised to do in our baptism. Does that make sense?
It does, but you're going to have to be a really good leader in order to pass that on to everybody in your group, you know, at the end of the hour. I mean, I just think it's hard to trust somebody with these, you know, outpourings of what we've done without having judgment come back on you. Or, you know, to pass that judgment on inadvertently to somebody else.
Well, I just say in
Yes.
my experience, judgment isn't what happens.
Awesome. I think that's great.
I've been doing this a long time, and I have never felt any kind of judgment from anybody when I show up to my covenant discipleship meeting and say, hey buddy, hey everybody, I've had a hell of a week and I haven't done any of this. I haven't even thought about it, but I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
And that counts for something. I'm here. And that
I
happens.
really appreciate Randy and Susie bringing this issue up, because I think it's going to be really important to have some conversation as a community around, you know, the spirit in which we want to be coming into this experience. And that we all come into the experience feeling vulnerable. We all come into the experience feeling like we come up short a lot of the time. You know, that kind of thing. And just to put those cards on the table and have that conversation, I think it's like we're having now, I think is really important. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, it'll be really important for us to, as a community, to talk about what confidentiality is. And how, you know, how we, you know, act out confidentiality.
Well, yeah, and that's an
situations
important,
with the big community.
and that is an important dynamic of the meeting that I didn't mention, that, you know, what you share in the meeting stays in the meeting. You know, you don't go out and talk about about what someone else said or did.
Do you,
Thank you, Jane.
I guess I would like to see some more flexibility, maybe time-wise, as Randy, you know, had brought up, but also in what happens in that first 25 minutes, because I've had different small group experiences where there are different ways that are used to kind of trigger reflection and discussion and sharing. Like in DBC, sometimes we come with a word that we've been thinking about. But also, I personally do not want to come to a meeting and try to list, you know, the good things that I've done that week. I don't want to do it at all. But I would be very happy to share either a struggle I had that week, or something where I felt God's presence in my life, or something especially meaningful, maybe if it was something where I reached out to somebody else. But I'd like to see more flexibility in that, instead of it sort of a laundry list, like we've got these categories, what have you done? Because that doesn't feel natural to me. And granted, I haven't tried it yet, so maybe that's part of it. But and I think I am influenced somewhat by having gone to DBC and been in other groups.
Okay. Well, this is just a suggestion. I know groups will do what they want to do, you know, and I'm not going to try to control that. This is my, you know, I guess my agenda is I want these groups to ideally to be centered in Christ and in how we are, you know, to help to encourage and help the members to be more intentional about living the Christian life in the world during the week. That's all. And also sharing and, you know, whatever, you know, doing conversation and sharing together around a study material or Bible study, or whatever the group wants to do. So
Okay.
any other comments or questions?
So Steve, do some of the groups then tend to become a little thematic about, what maybe what their group study is, and do you encourage or discourage that?
Well, again, I'm putting out that my bias is I want these groups to focus on discipleship. I want them to be Christ-centered. That's always going to be my bias as the pastor and from my experience. I also understand that groups are going to do what groups do. So if they want to go in another direction, there's nothing I can do or will do to stop them. Does that answer your questions, Kip?
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought you would say.
Well, thank you, Kip. In the short time I've been here, I think you have some understanding of who I am and where I'm coming from. And given where we are, as a nation and as a people, the fact that we can't gather together physically for worship or for anything for that matter, I want to find a way to have people get together more than just on Sunday mornings, and to develop, if anything comes out of these groups, is to develop deeper relationships with one another. I want to see that. That's the other thing, as a pastor, I want to engender and make possible for people. And that kind of relationship building doesn't happen if you just come on Sunday morning. We need other ways of bringing people together. DBC does a great job of that. And I don't want to interfere at all with what they're doing or compete with what they're doing. I just want to offer a different model or a way for people to gather in small groups. So we're at 7:36, so we're past the hour. Is there any other final questions, or was this helpful?
Yeah, that's great.
Is this something that, I just would like a show of hands, how many of you would be willing to be in a group?
Yes.
Almost all of you, so thank you. Could you, it would help me, those of you who are interested in the group idea, send me an email, like right now, or as soon as we sign off here. Shoot an email to Pastor Steve at grtumc.org. And we'll go from there. And we have, like I said, we got one more session, which is next week. We'll finish up with a session on discipleship and generosity. And same, I think that's right, October 18th at 6:30. And we'll close with these words from Charles Wesley.
That would
The
be
same hymn, number 561 in the hymnal. Help us to help each other, Lord, each other's cross to bear. Let all their friendly aid afford and feel each other's care. Thank you all for being with me tonight, and for all of the great comments. This is very helpful to me, and I hope it's helpful to you.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
One quick note, Steve, that would be the 14th, I think, a week from tonight.
Is it the 14th? Yeah, okay.
Just-
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sorry
Couple
about
summer
that.
days, yeah, 14th.
All right, thanks.
Very good.
You,
Thank
Steve.
See you
So
Sunday.
long.
Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Take
Good
care.
night. Bye.